Gentlemen, thank you both very much. Mr. Kamen, Mr. Tismanianu, thank you both very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
And that's our report for tonight. I'm Chris Wallace in Washington. For all of us at ABC News, good night.
Pent-up anger and resentment over the abuses of the Ceaușescu regime. Romanians are now openly celebrating news that he and his wife Elena were tried and executed. People watch television in fascinated silence as the trial is shown again and again. The most popular rerun on Romanian TV. This is their reaction when they see Elena Ceaușescu dead. The end of the Ceaușescu nightmare is the beginning of Romania's return to normalcy. Medical aid is arriving from all over the world. There is food in the stores more than ever now because it isn't being saved for the privileged anymore or being exported to keep Romania from having foreign debts. Times are changing fast. The symbol of these new times is Romania's old flag with its communist emblem cut from the center. Ceaușescu's regime with its heart torn out. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Bucharest.
Inside the military headquarters, people wait in the cold for a glimpse of anyone captured and brought in. They've lit so many candles for the victims that makeshift shrines are now pools of wax and oil. Tanks still stand guard. The hated past remains too fresh in memories for anyone to feel completely comfortable about the future. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Timișoara.
All over Bucharest today, people were shouting about democracy, taking delight in disorder. In one building, writers were rising from the underground, formulating their demands in a country where until yesterday, you needed a license to own a typewriter. In another smoke-filled room, students were voting on what to call their new union in a university where until yesterday, smoking and voting were both against the law.
We try to build now. That's it.
In this housing development, people were walking to their well this morning. They have no running water or heat or indoor plumbing that works, and the outdoor toilets have not been completed. A peasant woman forced into this place last March said she could still not believe two miraculous events: the death of Ceaușescu and the fact that she actually bought meat this morning. Other miracles were visible in the streets of Bucharest, people buying real coffee for the first time in 10 years. The provisional government announced no more rationing, no more food exports to the Soviet Union. Another export will be stopped: Romanian children. Under Ceaușescu, orphans were a cash crop to be sold for adoption in the West. Abortions were illegal, the orphanages were full. Those not sold were prepared from birth to join the secret police. One of Ceaușescu's policies came back to haunt him. In 1967, he outlawed birth control to increase the size of his empire. The baby boom he created, today's students and young workers, are the people who took to the streets and clamored for his downfall. The police were being hunted down in the streets today and below, in the vast network of tunnels which everyone knew existed, which no one outside the palace guard had ever seen before. Ordinary people were seeing things and each other differently. As of today, they are not required by law to call each other comrade anymore. Bob Simon, CBS News, Bucharest.
Reported that Ceaușescu recruited many of his security guard when they were teenage orphans. The result was a protection force which had virtually been brainwashed from childhood. In this underground operations center, the Securitate stored thousands of bullets, much of them made in America. More than a dozen personal safe deposit boxes had been emptied in a hurry. In this private restaurant, the Securitate ate far better than the Romanian citizens they terrorized. There was a complete secret chemical laboratory. Modern lab equipment was in every corner. There were specially made briefcases to hold chemicals with hidden connectors for rubber hoses which ran out the bottom. This soldier said the dissidents sometimes were brought here to be chemically tortured. This could not be confirmed. However, we did find small containers of poison gas.
All over the floor are clues to what might have gone on here. Here's a gas mask. And lo and behold, a bunch of business cards. And on the business card, Nicolae Ceaușescu, General Secretary, Romanian Republic.
Ceaușescu himself has already been punished for whatever he sanctioned in these rooms. The search continues for those who carried out the work of the Securitate. Mike Lee, ABC News, Bucharest.
These are the developments. 3 other members of Ceaușescu's family were arrested in Romania today. while in Austria, his oldest brother, a diplomat, was found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide.
Or die. The new government continued its sweep, arresting 3 more of Ceaușescu's relatives. A 4th, his brother, was found dead, apparently a suicide. For the first time in years, residents are buying real coffee and greeting each other without the required comrade. The week of revolution has left the country in need of help, though. Trains are leaving neighboring Hungary carrying blood plasma and medical equipment, and the Red Cross has raised $4 million to help out.
A Romanian artist in Portland is donating her work to help citizens in her homeland. Maria Tomos paints icons on glass, a painstaking technique that requires painting a mirror image on the back side of the glass. It's an ancient art that is traced back to the beginnings of Christianity. Tomos came to America herself about 13 years ago. Her paintings begin at about $200. All the proceeds will go to the Romanian Relief Fund.
They still have shortages, and the fights are still going on. And of course, we are very worried, and we'll do anything to help them. And we'd like to have everybody joining us in this action.
You'll find the art exhibit at the West Hills Unitarian Fellowship Church. That's at 8470 Southwest Olison Road in Portland. The paintings are on display until January 6th.
The lack of snow on Oregon's mountains is now beginning to concern those outside the ski industry. Today, the chief of the state on this Christmas Eve, that government is pleading for peace. Citizens join rebel soldiers today in battling secret police still loyal to ousted dictator Nicolae Ceaușescu. Ceaușescu and his wife were captured yesterday, 3 days after fleeing the presidential palace. Today's fighting is said to be savage, and the morgues in Bucharest are full. Thousands of other Romanians are dead in the countryside. 2 American journalists were wounded today. They are being evacuated to Yugoslavia. Family members and some staff are being evacuated from the American embassy. The daughter of American Ambassador Alan Punch Green of Portland is on her way to Bulgaria and then Frankfurt. The Green's daughter says her father remains safe inside the embassy in Bucharest. For Romanians now living in this country, understanding English news reports can be impossible. But as Don Reese reports, a special bilingual broadcast on a local radio station is helping new immigrants stay up to date with developments in Eastern Europe.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to broadcast in the next 30 minutes a series of Romanian carols. We would like to dedicate these carols to the victims in Romania.
For Gabriel Garasim, the night is filled with joy and sorrow. He and his radio co-host Carmen Costin know thousands of their fellow countrymen are dying in a bitter fight for freedom.
We're sad, but we're happy. You know, it's just, we have never thought that we would see this in our lifetimes. We have never thought that we would see this. We just thought that communism is there to stay.
In Romania, a 24-year nightmare is over.
Costin and Garasim broadcast news, music, and commentary every Saturday night on radio station KKEY. Their listeners include some 3,000 immigrants living in the Portland area.
Următoarele colinde victimelor orașelor Timișoara și Bucharest.
Romanian families like this one, now listening in amazement to news of sweeping reforms in Eastern Europe.
I have a very big joy, but I suffer a lot for the families who are there.
Maria Ciocchina came to this country to escape years of persecution. She is deeply saddened now by news of widespread fighting as loyalists to the Ceaușescu regime battle Romanian citizens.
Because instead of being free and to be able to enjoy this Christmas, they're forced because of this cruel man to die.
Stay tuned for an interview with the editor of a Romanian newspaper published in...
Tonight's guest on the Romanian Hour is Ovid Vasilescu, sentenced to 15 years hard labor in a work camp while still a teenager for his political beliefs. Vasilescu's newspaper, Liberty, is read by Romanians throughout the U.S.
Could you tell us what are your impressions about the transformation taking place right now in Romania?
Oh, it's grateful. I hope, as every Romanian hopes, that soon our country is going to be freed. I hope that soon everything is going to be set up and the communist defeat will be all over.
Despite fighting and death, these Romanians are confident the new year will bring new freedom and new hope throughout Eastern Europe.
This is KKY 1150 AM. We are the only radio program serving the Romanian community throughout.
Safely escaped to Germany with other Westerners. Green's family reports that he received a phone call from President Bush this morning, but they did not know the contents of the conversation. U.S.
Just on that, communist leader Nicolae Ceaușescu and his wife have been executed. The sudden announcement said that they had been convicted at a secret trial. There were few details, no independent confirmation. President Bush gave U.S. recognition late today to the anti-Ceaușescu coalition now claiming power. By most accounts, the civil war continues. Amid the killing and confusion, Christmas carols were sung openly for the first time in decades. Martha Teichner is in Romania.
Nicolae Ceaușescu și Elena Ceaușescu.
The announcement on Christmas night that Ceaușescu and his wife had been tried and executed was a shock even to the nation that hated them. They were accused of murdering 60,000 of their own people, for destroying their country, and then trying to escape after pocketing $1 billion. It was a stunning end to the first Christmas Romanians have celebrated openly in a generation. They did it in the spirit of revolution. And for the first time since Ceaușescu's overthrow, they dared to feel as if they'd won. A Christmas peace enforced by tanks, a fragile and uneasy calm, but one that is spreading as Romania's army strengthens its position. It seemed just safe enough to light candles at the foot of a Christmas tree at a spot where students were killed in rioting last week. At every corner where someone died, there were more candles. Sadness and celebration have been joined forever here at Christmas. Christmas came to Timișoara, where the uprising began, in the form of medical aid. Here, as many as 12,000 people may have been killed. Even today, heavy fighting was reported as the army hunted down and caught more holdout members of the secret police still loyal to Nicolae Ceaușescu. In Bucharest, soldiers and self-appointed vigilantes led CBS News inside the wrecked royal palace in order to show off a captured colonel from Ceaușescu's elite guard.
Absolut, da.
A man clearly out to save his own skin now that the game is up and Ceaușescu is gone. Romania's most remarkable Christmas, the day they dug graves for some of the people who died to make it happen. It was a day of chaos and celebration and vengeance. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Bucharest.
Revolution has not come gently to Romania. Days after Ceaușescu and his clan fled or tried to, the army is still blasting the buildings from which power has been exercised these last 40 years. The Communist Party Secretariat, Ceaușescu's private office. Shell after shell, less a military tactic than a fit of rage. People taking a little Christmas stroll became terrified spectators, full of the thrill and fear of disbelief. The old order had ended. The harder they are, the bigger the fall. There's no question of talking to the erstwhile rulers of Romania. This is not Hungary or Czechoslovakia. Anyone loyal to Ceaușescu is a wanted man. An armored regiment is engaged against a handful of snipers who refuse to die or surrender and who have nowhere to go. The Battle of Bucharest seems to be almost over, but it is ending not with a whimper, but with a bang. The battle for Romanian television ended last night. This morning, there were no windows or lights or certainty that it would not begin again. But the army moved in more tanks, soldiers dug fresh positions, and people came to work because it was worth it.
We hope to be free after 40 years. You can't understand that.
TV Romania is the voice of the revolution and much more. It is the military command post and the seat of government because the generals and politicians who are running the country right now are here around the clock, broadcasting plans for the future, memories of the past. Today they were bringing in paintings and Persian carpets from what was the home of Nicolae Ceaușescu, the man who starved his people as an economic policy. The house was guarded by soldiers instead of secret police today. The streets were as empty as they've always been. Under Ceaușescu, the entire neighborhood was off limits to ordinary people, so many of whom hoped for the verdict which was delivered.
He and his family, I think that they will be shot in the head.
At the Basilica of St. Constantine and Elena, 3 wise men of the Romanian Orthodox Church officiated today at a Christmas Mass, while an entire nation, a largely Christian nation,
was reliving some of the oldest themes of mankind, the death of tyrants, the birth of hope. Bob Simon, CBS News, Bucharest.
In the case of Ben, his wife were executed after a military court found them guilty of genocide, stealing state funds, and trying to escape prosecution. There has been no independent confirmation. NBC's Arthur Kent is in Bucharest tonight.
Nicolae Ceaușescu și Elena Ceaușescu au fost...
The announcement on Romanian television was brief.
Sentința a rămas definitivă și a fost executată.
Both Ceaușescu and his wife were condemned to death. The execution, the announcer said, has been carried out. Television pictures tonight most Romanians thought they'd never see. The man they called the tyrant, Nicolae Ceaușescu, brought unceremoniously into custody in an armored personnel carrier. And, before appearing before a special military tribunal, the former dictator is given a medical examination. Many Romanians find it hard to believe the man who ruled them with a ruthlessness verging on fanaticism is finally gone.
I'm truly happy, and I am emotional that I know that it will be true. Okay. It will be okay.
Tonight, a member of the National Salvation Council sang a Christmas carol on Romanian television, a carol banned in this country for 40 years because of its celebration of the birth of Christ. The Romanian Army's big guns, guns that have roared through the weekend, were silent in Bucharest, the capital, this Christmas Day. But in the narrow streets of the city center, soldiers and civilians watched for snipers, the die-hard Securitate troops still loyal to Nicolae Ceaușescu. Yesterday's heavy fighting has kept the army and the people on edge. One hotspot, Romanian television. Army units returned sniper fire from the courtyard, protecting studios that have become the Provisional Reform Government's virtual seat of power. In the most recent battle here, Securitate gunmen closed in on the studio building. The army fought back. NBC cameraman Max Mattioli and soundman Stefano Generali were caught in the crossfire, but emerged unharmed. Later, reinforcements arrived, one of the citizen volunteer units that have taken up arms in the past 2 days to defend the new government and help defeat the old regime. They lack experience. Have you been trained in the use of that rifle?
No.
This electrician last week went to the barricades barehanded.
Without gun. Now I have a gun.
The growing defense force today helped bring calm to the streets, relief for civilians weary of the sounds of battle. If the fighting has eased, the paranoia in Bucharest has not. At barricades like this one, citizens' committees check the papers of every passing motorist and most pedestrians, still on the lookout for Ceaușescu's men. It's a menacing atmosphere broken only by the faintest traces of Christmas cheer. Except, perhaps, in the churches of Bucharest. Here, the celebration of Christmas Mass has risen above the turmoil in the streets. Tonight, Romania's faithful mark not only the birth of Christ, they pray for the rebirth of a nation, their Romania. Arthur Kent, NBC News, Bucharest.
The Bush administration expressed regret that the trial of Ceaușescu did not take place in an open and public fashion. But almost immediately after word of his death, the United States established diplomatic relations with Romania's new government. Recognition came as well today from the Soviet Union. Beyond the politics and violence of Romania, there was much giving on this Christmas Day, and NBC's George Lewis now on help for Romania's victims.
These Romanians had not counted on having to do this on Christmas Day, bury one of the victims of the violence here. The priest would rather have been celebrating a holiday mass, and the heavy equipment operator who was digging scores of holes for more graves would rather have been at home with his family. There will be many more burials like this one.
There are thousands, and they are our heroes,
There are also living heroes here on this Christmas. The medical teams who have been working around the clock to tend the wounded. This hospital has treated more than 600 casualties. 90 have died so far. It's a depressing way for these people to practice their profession. The doctor in the yellow surgical cap is part of a team of French physicians who gave up their holidays to come here and help out. Others came from afar bearing gifts. The Germans were here with a plane load of medical supplies as their contribution. The holiday did not ease the tension in the streets. Military checkpoints are everywhere, troops searching for the remnants of the Ceaușescu secret police. Anyone suspected of being a collaborator is detained. Goodwill toward men is not always in evidence here. But in spite of all the problems and the suffering, there is a spirit of triumph. These people feel they have won for themselves the best Christmas present of all: liberty.
It is doubtlessly a good Christmas present, but it would have been better if everything would have been quiet right now, so we could have a real Christmas celebration.
This Christmas, people can speak freely against communism. They can put up Christmas decorations in public places. Two things unheard of in 40 years. But they must also take time to mourn the dead and remember the terrible price Romania is paying for freedom. George Lewis, NBC News.
Will prompt the dictator's secret forces to surrender.
And the new government of Romania officially received U.S. diplomatic recognition today, delivered by the American ambassador Alan Punch Green. Green left his home in Portland less than a month ago to assume the post in Bucharest. This morning, he presented the message in person from President Bush to the new deputy prime minister. Later, the ambassador talked with Northwest medical teams and Channel 2 News by telephone. Green says the fighting has eased and the gunfire is only sporadic.
I walked around town for the first time they let me. I went out with 2 security guards. The students have formed around, and there's a lot of candles lit for the people, for the very brave Romanians who died.
Ambassador Green says he is still unable to return to the American embassy near the airport in Bucharest, which has been the scene of some of the heaviest fighting. Mrs. Green, other American dependents, and staff left Bucharest by automobile caravan and arrived safely in West Germany last week. And as the fighting appears to be decreasing in Romania, medical supplies are beginning to reach the wounded. Shipments from the Soviet Union and France have arrived, and the U.S. State Department has asked the Northwest medical team from Portland to assess the needs in Romania. And Jim Hyde reports the team may leave as soon as tomorrow.
The Northwest medical teams have responded generously before to pleas for help from Mexico City, Ethiopia, Nicaragua. That's why anxious Romanian emigres came to the offices of the volunteer organization in Tigard, and the U.S. State Department has asked the team to learn firsthand about specific medical help in Romania.
They'll go possibly as early as tomorrow to assess the needs as to what long-range help is needed in Romania. At this time, we've been told by the ambassador that medical personnel at the moment may not be needed.
Team leaders talked to Ambassador Punch Green in Bucharest by telephone. He relayed the request of the new government there, voiced by the Deputy Prime Minister.